of Pharmacy. That's in Vallejo on Mare Island, if you happen to know the Bay Area. And I'm going to just start my presentation as I talk, get it going. Okay. Can everybody see this? All right, I'll just, his head's going up and down. I'll assume everybody can see it. All right, so as I said, I work right down here. It says Professor and Founding Chair, Department of Biological and Pharmaceutical Sciences, College of Pharmacy, Torrey University, California. So I was one of the faculty members that started this pharmacy school 16 years ago out on Mare Island. And that's what I do mostly. What I do is I teach students basic science who want to be pharmacists, which entails teaching them some biology, advanced biology, things about disease, and teaching them about the drugs they're going to use. Pharmacology, which is sort of the study of mechanisms of how drugs do their thing. Medicinal chemistry, which talks about the structures of different drug molecules, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I teach pharmacy math. It turns out that pharmacy, some kinds of pharmacy requires that you know some math, but anyone with deep math anxiety is welcome. It's perfectly possible to do this work even if you have some math anxiety. I spent probably a good 25, 30 years before that as a researcher, as an anti-cancer drug researcher, drugs for arthritis, drugs for Alzheimer's disease. I'm a founding faculty member of the Buck Institute for Age Research in Nevada. So some of you are familiar with Marin County, and you probably have either been to the Buck Institute or you certainly know of it. I was one of the first human beings to stand up on the hill of dirt that was the Buck Institute at the end of 1998. So I was there about 6, 7 years and then moved over to Vallejo to move from research to teaching. So that's basically the end of my career. I was asked to give this talk primarily because I've had a rather unusual career, and my son-in-law thought it would be funny to give people an idea of what career paths can look like. And I've decided to save that to the end of the talk because I thought it was more useful, especially since we have a lot of folks that are in high school or about to finish high school, kind of as a mentor, what I would say right now for students who are looking in general to get into the healthcare field, not anything in particular yet, but just in general. The first thing I want to talk about is, it's surprising to people how many healthcare jobs are actually available, types of healthcare jobs. So without further ado, let's start into that. So before college, as far as looking to see what kind of career you might be interested in the medical field or the healthcare field, if you're in college, you're farther along in this process. The talk is scheduled to imagine someone who's just leaving high school and they're in their summertime and they're trying to think about what they want to do. This is a resource that people like myself never had, and it's not a glib remark here. You can find an amazing amount of information on the internet for careers and jobs in healthcare, and I'm going to help you a little bit with some of the things I've found. But it is an amazing resource to at least get you started understanding, opinions about certain healthcare jobs as far as what they are, and that may differ from one person to the next as to what they think those jobs are. And one thing leads to another when you start looking on the internet. What you can find very rapidly if you're trying to find a career in healthcare is documents like the California Healthcare Jobs Working for Tomorrow document. And there it is. And CETA will have this presentation and a PDF file of this document. And I have excerpts from this document in the presentation. And depending upon time limits, we may open another one of those and look specifically at things in the document. So in addition to looking on the internet and looking at documents, the kinds of things to start asking yourself are, what jobs seem to interest you intuitively? Now, the interesting thing about that teaching at a pharmacy school is I would say most people that go to pharmacy school think of community pharmacists. It's, they go into they go into CVS and they get a prescription and they leave and they see somebody behind a counter. I want to impress upon all the students, it's true for the medical field and it's true for pharmacy field and a lot of other jobs related to healthcare. The number of types of jobs in those fields is far, far greater than the typical person thinks are available to somebody. So, when someone says pharmacy, you'll be shocked to know that there's all sorts of pharmacy that has nothing to do with the clinical environment of being at a community pharmacy and filling prescriptions. So you want to scan and read job descriptions and think about what these different kinds of jobs are. Then you would want to ask yourself questions like, how much training or school do I need to get this job? The reason for that is that some of these training programs are associate's degrees. Some of them require bachelor's degrees. Some of them require master's degrees. Some of them require doctorate degrees in order to have these jobs. So that means an investment of time. And so here's a list of every category here fits some of the jobs that I'll show you as far as what sort of education you need in order to, qualify to go out and try to get such a job, one of these jobs in healthcare. And then you need to ask yourselves, what's it cost to go to school nowadays? That's a very significant thing. And you want to sit down and I've got one of the other documents I put here as a resource document comes from the Department of Labor Statistics, so that you can not only see a listing of healthcare jobs and their descriptions of what they are, but it also talks about what's, in detail, what sort of schooling you need in order to get those jobs, what sort of certificates you need, and also, in some cases, how much school costs in general. And certainly, one would think a professor, by the way, could spell school. And furthermore, how much on average does school cost? Because that's definitely an issue. And you'll find that the ratio of school, average cost of school, and the ratio of how much time you have to put into number of years in order to get a degree in something, there's a balance between that and how much is this thing going to cost me. So if you have a high salary that you're going to get after a certain number of years, maybe that's okay to have a bigger loan. I'll leave it to you to make those kinds of decisions about that sort of thing. But it's something that you absolutely have to be looking at. And how much does the job pay? Obviously, it shouldn't drive what you love to do, but these are just things that, as a young person, you should certainly be screening and thinking about. And these things aren't set in stone; they change. The pay for certain jobs goes up and down, but this is a great document: Healthcare Occupations Occupational Outlook Handbook by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So. That's another great resource, and I gave that to CETA so that you could start looking there. How many jobs are there? There are also articles on projections. I think some of this is in the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics document up above. What does the job outlook look like? How many jobs are there now? What's the projected into the future? Those are things I wish I had asked myself when I was looking. When I was looking, by the way, I did what I did in the beginning only because my mother had a high school diploma, my father had a college diploma. Nobody else in our entire extended family had ever gotten a PhD. And so my sole motivator for when I started was, well, gee, I think I want to get a PhD. Didn't even care what it was in the beginning. I didn't think about money. I didn't think about costs. I didn't think about anything. So on the other hand, in those days, you had to go physically to a counselor or to a library, et cetera, in order to find out information about what the world was really like. Now you can get, lots of information at your fingertips if you're willing to go out there and hunt for it. And how much does the job pay? I've already talked about that. All right, and then one other thing is how stressful are the jobs in healthcare that you might be interested in? I mean, we just came through a year of COVID-19 kind of things. We know that healthcare jobs can be stressful. Jobs can be stressful. So some of them are more stressful than others. Some types of stress are easier to handle than other types of stress, depending upon who you are. A community pharmacist stands behind a counter, filling prescriptions and dealing with the front lines of folks that are usually not feeling very well, and they're oftentimes not happy. So, there are some folks that love that environment. There are some folks that have little interaction with patients in healthcare, while other jobs have a lot of interaction with patients, like physical therapy, for example. You're touching the patient, you're with them all the time. There are jobs in healthcare, for example, in medicine, there's a job where you basically are paid to look at MRIs and x-rays and things like that, pictures, images of people's bodies. So most of your work is not necessarily dealing with a lot of folks. And I personally have known friends in my life that went to medical school and immediately decided to be a radiologist because they didn't want to, interact with folks. So getting an idea of these, about what makes you tick, what drives you, what's your personality. It's a good thing just to get a sense of that when you're starting this journey. Now, you could change your mind. A lot of people change their mind on these journeys. Okay, and then some jobs require that you think on your feet very quickly, and other jobs are more relaxed. So what I mean by this, and I can use the pharmacy example again, there's something known as a clinical pharmacist, and they work in hospitals. And this relates to COVID-19, for example. There are pharmacists that, it's their specialty for antibiotic drugs and for people that have serious infections. And they work standing next to physicians and trying to figure out what drug regimens are going to be most appropriate for someone who's very sick. So you can't, you don't have time to just go sit down and have a Diet Coke and relax and think about the world. You really, have to think quickly. Some people like those environments and other people just don't. Some jobs you work in large teams, and if you like teamwork and being a part of a team, there are, jobs in the healthcare field for you. And if you like to work in small teams or actually even alone, there are jobs in the healthcare field, for you. There are certainly jobs that emphasize people skills. So not just, interaction with patients, but you just really like to be around people a lot. And then there are jobs that, require that you don't have to have as many people skills. So if someone says to you, you don't have people skills, so you can't go into healthcare, they're not being creative enough with you. If you like medicine, or you like even just biology, or you like chemistry, or even if you like business, anything like that, it's quite possible to find jobs in healthcare depending upon your particular personality. And I'm saying all this because of burnout that happens in all professions. So nobody can prevent burnout, but certainly you can help, to prevent it a little bit or help ameliorate it by taking a hard look at who you really are and being proud of who you are and accepting who you are. Because you can find, when you see the list of possible jobs in healthcare, if you're interested in biology or taking care of people or chemistry or whatever, you can find a job. All right, so now the next thing is going to seem a little topical and potentially silly, but it's not. And I actually do this a lot myself, which is to watch YouTube videos about your potential jobs. I can give an example. For reasons I was interested in arthritis, I've been interested in as a scientist for a long time, and I got on a kick of watching every possible knee replacement surgery operation I could possibly watch on the internet. I was floored. I mean, you can just go on and on and on and on. So you can find YouTube videos of people who, on the job even, will walk you through what their job is. Not for every kind of job, but for a surprising number of jobs. And note that everything I've described to you up to this point, as much as I'm a mentor and counselors are there for you, and I believe in mentorship, every single thing I've said so far, you can do by yourself, or you can start it by yourself. So there's a lot of power in your hands to, go out there and learn about what might be out there for you. Now, if it turns out some of the jobs in healthcare require a high school diploma, or a high school diploma and some training. If it turns out that you've picked a job or you think you might want to be in a job that does require undergraduate bachelor's degree, either as an end, in other words, it just requires a bachelor's degree to do your healthcare job, or it requires that you have to go on and you have to go to medical school, or you have to go to pharmacy school, et cetera, or nursing school, or physical therapy school, or physician's assistant school. You generally need to go to a college, 2-year or 4-year, it depends upon what it is. And what you want to do now, before you ever go to a college, if you're just looking at colleges and you've picked one, it's great. If you're looking around, go look at their website and look and see if they talk about their student clubs that are healthcare related. Most universities have healthcare related clubs for students that are great resources for meeting people that are interested in the things that you're interested in. Also, they're just great in general for updated information and for networking. You might as well start now, because I have to say, although there are certainly exceptions in the healthcare world in general is a highly networked structure for most of these jobs. So getting used to the idea of, I'm a person, here I am alone, and I have to go out in the world, and to make this work, I've got to, get involved with other people. Starting early really helps. It's better to learn that now than when you're 60 years old. Let me put it that way. All right, so during college, go and find and join one of these student organizations that's related to your particular career. See if you can volunteer or do internships. This is far more powerful than people think. And I realize we're in a world now where we require students to do, lots of internships, and it's a very difficult process overall for lots of us. But it's still an incredibly valuable thing. So I would go out and, look about volunteering. And volunteering, I have students in the pharmacy field that, they didn't appreciate that volunteering for a community pharmacy or volunteering even for a researcher was going to do them that much good. And then it turned out it totally transformed their life. So these things can be transformative to go and do. And then you need, typically, people say, go find a mentor or, an advisor of some kind. I would add, you need to probably find 15. There's different advisors for different things. But you want to reach out to people that have been down the road already, have a career, and ask them things. You'll be shocked at how, receptive they usually are, because most people that are in these professions aren't asked questions from young folks. They aren't. Okay. Prerequisites. So, for professions like medical school, nursing school, pharmacy school that do require advanced degrees, oftentimes one of the biggest hurdles in the healthcare field is students go all the way through college, then they decide they want to go into medical school, nursing school, or whatever, and suddenly they're told, too bad, you don't have enough prerequisites. So then you have to go back to a community college or some other place and get more courses. Now, that's not a horrible thing. I've been through that myself, but if you can, it's certainly worth thinking about it, that it's a piece of the puzzle now, that lots of these programs in medicine or healthcare related jobs, when you're in school, have prerequisites to get into the next step. So when you finish college with your bachelor's degree, let's say, you're going to have some, prerequisites in order to get into a nursing school. And so how do you handle that? You handle that either by ahead of time realizing it. So you might be in your 3rd year of college, and you know what your science prerequisites are going to be to get in nursing school. They might be math, they might be biology. So you can start handling those kinds of issues earlier, rather than being told suddenly that, this is a great career, I'm glad you're on the path, but by the way, you're not going to be able to do it for another 1 or 2 years, because you got to go back and fulfill some more prerequisites before you can. Prerequisites are just courses that you need to take in order to do the job. Okay, I need to speed it up here. So here in this document, which will be online, there are typical things we know about dental assistants, dentists, nurse practitioners. These all come from the document I have that CETA has. Physical therapists, physicians, and surgeons, optometrists, registered nurses, psychologists. One of the documents has all sorts of classic, descriptions of jobs in the medical field. This document is designed to show you the breadth of the kinds of jobs you can get in healthcare. It's overwhelming when you really look at it. I mean, you'll recognize some things that you commonly see, but the take-home message of looking at this slide is just, if you like science, if you like people, either one or both together, you like helping, it's quite possible for you to find a niche for yourself, depending upon what you want to do with your life and your skill set. Okay, so I'm going to sort of wrap it up now by talking a little bit about pharmacy, because pharmacy is just a reflection of basically some of these other fields. Pharmacy has some good things about it if you want to go do it. One is that pharmacist jobs are, if you take the last table I just showed you here and find pharmacy right there, and then you blow pharmacist up, you'll see that pharmacy by itself, I'll jump ahead, is chain community pharmacy. So that's what most people think about. The truth is that this isn't even a full list of the kinds of jobs you can get if you go off and you get what's known as a PharmD, which is a doctorate degree in pharmacy. There's all sorts of jobs that are available: home care, hospital work, the pharmaceutical industry, even public policy and law, working for the government, compounding medicines, that's making the medicines up yourself. So I don't want you guys to limit yourselves at this point. If if the only thing you've ever seen out there was a dentist or a nurse, go out there on your own and look for things. One thing I would like to say about some professions is that some of the professions have easy ends into the profession and some don't. So for example, with pharmacists, lots of them are pharmacy technicians first. They go through high school, they take some courses, or they have to pass a test. It's a California State Board test. And then they can become a pharmacy technician and earn some money and be a pharmacist and work alongside a pharmacist formally. So it's not shadowing, you get paid. And it can give you an idea of what the real world is like for people who work in community pharmacists. That gives you a leg up when you go and apply to a pharmacy school like Touro University's school where I work. So those are other options. If you don't feel like you want to just jump into something, and it's not just pharmacy that has these. You can take incremental steps into a profession and actually get paid sometimes in order to do it. Okay. So here is a summary of these two documents that I sent to Sita, and either you can get them from her, or frankly, the reason I pasted these here was because even without those, you can go find them yourselves, because they're the web addresses. These are just fantastic things to look at if you're trying to get an overview of what healthcare jobs are out there. Okay. Now, I want to end by saying sometimes the paths that you're on may not seem to make sense. It doesn't matter if that's true. Lots of folks, we all know somebody, or you will, that wanted to be a doctor when they were 5, and they wanted to be a doctor when they were 10, 15, 20, and 30 or whatever, and they're a doctor, and that's all they ever wanted to be, and they're totally happy. That's not the typical career path for most people, and it certainly isn't a typical path for people in healthcare necessarily. There are times when things will not make sense on your path. They may seem out of reach. All those things are absolutely normal, which is another reason it's really important to find people that can support you when you're trying to figure out things and where to go. It's also important to take things one step at a time and not judge things too harshly when you're making some of these steps. And finally, it's the cliche, if you love something, don't give it up. And that is a cliche. There have been a billion books written about it. But I have a story about that. I mean, I told you that, the reason that that I was asked to give this talk had to do with, describing to folks my non-traditional path myself, so that that might inspire someone if they're having difficulty along their path. So my story was this weird dream of getting a doctorate degree. And I found myself at college in biology, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I was in a single class on physics. I loved it. I loved looking at math formulas. I realized I had a horrible background in math. It was just awful. And I just wanted to do it so much. I taught myself math and scrounged and ended up getting a PhD in theoretical physics. Because, along the path that I wasn't quite sure of, I had moments where, things mattered and I accelerated. And if I had just, most of my life was spent thinking I'm not normal, I'm not on a path. Other people have it put together. I don't have it put together. Now you'd think, well, that's the end of the story. He became a theoretical physicist. So why am I teaching at a pharmacy school? I'm teaching at a pharmacy school because I found myself working as a physicist, a theoretical physicist, for what's known as the Northrop Corporation, which they make the B-2 bomber, and one of the bomber airplanes for warfare and all that. That's a typical job for theoretical physicists. If you're not teaching, is you work for government contracts. And one day I woke up and I just said, this is ridiculous. I want to go back to what I loved in the beginning, which is biology, and yet I want to do math. So how can I do math or do biology? So the first thing was I had to go back and retrain myself at 40 years old to work in a lab in UC San Diego in how to make anti-cancer drugs. And I just knew I wanted to do it. And so that's what I did. And I did that and at the Buck Institute as a researcher for a good, including my time in San Diego, 10 years, just working on designing drugs for various disease states. Then I suddenly realized, well, wait a minute, I'm a mathematician. I spent, almost 20 years doing math, and now I'm a biologist. How can you put together biology and math, Michael, and make it matter to students? I mean, what kind of student on a daily basis needs to know math to the degree that if you don't know math, you could kill someone? Who is that? Turns out it's pharmacists. So I found out about this job, this school opening. I was living in Marin, working at the Buck Institute, and this new pharmacy school was happening over in Vallejo. And I went and interviewed for it. And I've spent the last 16 years teaching pharmacy students about mathematics and other topics. And the reason they need to know math is because they need to know how to dose a drug. And although we have, in a community pharmacy setting, oftentimes the doses are figured out. If you're working in a hospital, you have to make up your own medicines. There's compounding of medicines, which is making up your own medicines. You have to do it right. If you don't do it right, you can hurt somebody. To make it up right, you have to be good at math, or you have to know, certainly enough math to make that work. And I realized that there's a way to put my whole life together in a package where I could have an impact on young people. So that's what I did. And I think with that, I'll end. And if there are questions, I'm available.
Yeah, I actually, no, that's perfect. Thank you. Thanks so much, Dr. Ellerby, for a very comprehensive list and information here. And we have a couple of questions. One question that one of the attendees asked is, where do you recommend looking for mentors? How do you ask someone to be your mentor? What qualities should you look for in a mentor?
Yeah, that's a great question, because certainly, I mean, it's not impossible, but certainly it's not normal to find a mentor on YouTube. So absolutely, the way you find them, and I'm assuming it would depend upon what kind of healthcare job someone's interested in. If the healthcare job requires that you get any more education, any more at all, whether it's at a junior college or a community college, whether it's you need to go to a four-year college. The way you find a mentor is you go listen to them do what they do. Like usually it's giving a talk of some kind, or you take a class from them, but you can sit in on classes. It all starts with you, though. You go and you listen, you go on, start online, look at something that might interest you. See if somebody at the school you're at teaches that or gives talks on that, this requires footwork and guts and grit. It doesn't require intelligence hardly at all. It's literally that old adage of 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. You just get out and you need to get in front of people to have them be a mentor, usually. Not always, but usually you need to get out there and then you need to just ask people, I'm interested in what you do. Do you have some time to talk about something? Or, I've been thinking about this. Most of the time, you will get folks responding really well to those things. It's surprising. I think what I'm describing right now is one of the biggest places where there's a gigantic gap. There's so much potential in the simple interactions I've just described, and yet people go to the threshold and don't do it. So do it. I mean, that's how you find them.
Thank you, Dr. Ellerby. And I saw a question in the box about opportunities with the Buck Institute. MCOE and College of Marin can help assist you with that as well too. And we can always connect with Dr. Ellerby later on about some of those opportunities. But Dr. Ellerby, before you get off, so I used to work at the Maritime Academy in Vallejo. So I know where Turo used to play golf around there at Mare Island as well. Can you talk just briefly just about like Turo University, what's the experience, like the campus, just for students who are unfamiliar with Turo, as an option?
Yeah, no. So just as you said, if you remember where the golf course is, just down from the hills or whatever, the golf course sits Turo University Turo University, California. And what's there is a university composed of several healthcare kinds of colleges. So there's a College of Osteopathic Medicine, there's a College of Nursing, there's a College of Pharmacy, there is a PA program, there's a Physician's Assistant program, there's a Public Health program, and there's a College of Education program. And I'm old, so I probably forgot something. But it's if you're interested in some kind of healthcare job and you live in the Bay Area, it is a nice place. It's a resource. Most of the people that work there would actually just respond to any student if they just emailed a professor in any department. Just introduce yourself and say, you want some advice about something. Does that help, Alex?
No, yeah, that was perfect. No, thank you. And if anybody has any questions about like Turo or any follow-up questions for Dr. Ellerby, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll connect everybody. But Dr. Ellerby, thank you for taking time out of your day to, chat with everybody. Definitely appreciate it. So right now, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to transition from healthcare to wildfire. And today we have Mark Brown. He's the Executive Director for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And Mark, if you can, just tell the attendees, a little bit about yourself, your journey, and then connect them with, information that's occurring, within like Marin County, especially specifically like with Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, what that entity and organization looks like. The floor is yours. That would be great.
You bet. Thank you for having me here. I've been looking forward to this. Always love to talk wildfire and helping people get on the path into a really rewarding career. And I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth a little bit between the actual suppression side of wildfire and discussing that aspect of it, but also the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which is a first of its kind type of organization, and what type of new career paths that's creating. Because what we're finding is that there's people that want to get into the fire service, but they may not necessarily be wanting to get into the fire service as firefighters. Maybe they want to get into the wildfire prevention or other aspects and contribute to their community in that way. I'm not going to give a lot of descriptions about fire departments because I think everyone has a pretty good mindset of what fire departments are all about. But I will describe what the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is. And it is a first of its kind organization, and we are solely focused on wildfire prevention. And it really came about after the 2017 fires in the North Bay. And we did a lessons learned panel, and we brought all the people from Sonoma County who were involved in those fires. And we found out what challenges they had, what successes they had, And we created a path or a list of items that we felt needed to be accomplished in order to prevent such a catastrophe to occur in Marin. And when we created this 7 to 9 page list filled with tasks that needed to occur, we realized there was no one agency that was charged with making those happen. The fire service does a great job of responding as one agency, regardless of what patches on the side of the door, responding to fires. But what we found was when it comes to prevention, there was not a unified effort. And so the civil grand jury grabbed a hold of that and echoed what that report was saying. Therefore, the MWPA was created as a joint powers authority of 17 member agencies within Marin. We had Measure C that was on the ballot for March of 2020, creating a funding source. So we are funded at $20 million a year. 60% of our budget is towards vegetation management, public education, evacuation route clearing, and fire detection. And the public education part's been huge to get people to understand the residents and the homeowners' responsibility they have in keeping their community safe. The vegetation management is that we have 110 years of deferred maintenance. Think about that. Eliminating wildfire from our environment was actually not a good decision to make. Our forests need fire in order for them to stay healthy. And it's these unhealthy forests that are creating these catastrophic fires, coupled with climate change, coupled with continuing to push people further and further into the wildland. And so that's why we are going to be focusing on veg management to help create a healthier and more resilient forest. And then evacuation route clearing is that we know that people often die during evacuations, whether they didn't leave in time, their evacuation routes got blocked by fire, or traffic jams made it so that they couldn't get out. So our goal with the evacuation route clearing is that they will not be impacted by so much fire that people can't survive on it. We know traffic jams are going to occur. So once we get people in cars on our evacuation routes, we want them to be able to survive. And so when you look at the vegetation management, that's work. That is manual labor, but it's skilled manual labor. And so we are looking for a work pool of people that are able to do that. Our next area that we fund is 20% of our money goes towards defensible space evaluations. And that's where evaluators go through and go around the homes with the resident and make recommendations of what they need to do in order to make their homes safe. And one of the messages we're trying to drive home is that the strength of our communities is a sum of its parts. And if everyone does their part, then our communities become that much stronger. And this is where we're finding a lot of people want to get involved in the fire service is in the defensible space evaluation program, and being that advocate that goes home to home and interacts with the members of the public and guides them to making good decisions on their what they've done with their home and what they're doing with their landscaping around their home. It's actually pretty amazing how many people that we are getting transitioning out of one career and into this new career. And quite frankly, we did not have a good training program or a good career path for people to get that education to do the job appropriately. So we've been creating some lesson plans and curriculum on our own. And now we're starting to partner with Alex and the College of Marin to create a good program within the College of Marin to create that career path. And then the final 20% of our money is going towards back into our local agencies for local mitigation programs. And again, we see a tremendous amount of people who do not have opportunities to get through the doorway into a fire service career, whether it's a typical suppression career like I had, and then I transitioned into wildfire prevention, or maybe straight into wildfire prevention. And that's why we are, and maybe you saw it in an independent journal, but the Marin County Fire Department spearheading a program to get our underserved populations an opportunity to get housing, education, and a foothold in a career in the fire service. And a lot of it will be into vegetation management. The MWPA will help fund that. and then we'll help provide education. And so after 2 or 3 years, they actually can come out of it with associates in fire science, their firefighter 1 and their EMT 1, and they will be competitive in the wildfire, or not just wildfire, in the fire service in general, but also we see it could be into the prevention world of wildfire or traditional fire prevention. Or it could be maybe they when they went out and did this work outside and they see the resiliency that we're creating in the forest, maybe they want to get into environmental sciences and they get into something outside of the fire service. You know, if my career journey, you know, I grew up in Kenwood, a small town in Sonoma County. My dad was a volunteer firefighter. And like a lot of kids of firefighters, it seemed like an attractive route to go. And I became a junior firefighter when I was 16 years old at the Kenwood Volunteer Fire Department. And I fell in love with being a public servant and serving my community. I think that was one of the things my parents instilled into me. They did a lot of volunteer work to help their community. And I think that's what helped start me down my path. Part of my training to be a volunteer firefighter was medical training for emergency medicine. And I really started to fall in love with that. So I became an EMT. I worked for a private ambulance company, taking care of people in the back of the ambulance as an EMT. And that launched me into my paramedic program. And I went down to Southern California to go through my paramedic program down there with the full intent that I was going to work as a paramedic for a while and go back to school and become a doctor. I was just that much so enamored with the medical industry. But the fire service is addicting. It's a high level of camaraderie. It's a very rewarding profession. And so I stuck with that and was hired at the Marin County Fire Department when I was 21 years old. Very lucky to get such a great job at the age that I got it. And I worked as a firefighter paramedic. And Marin County Fire Department is what's called a contract county with CAL FIRE. So instead of CAL FIRE being in Marin to provide the wildfire protection in Marin, they contract with Marin County Fire to do it. So really my specialty was pointed towards wildfire response. And I just worked through the traditional ranks of the fire service. I started as a firefighter, became an engineer, and the engineer is the person that drives the fire truck and operates the engine at the scene. Became a fire captain, which was tremendously rewarding, where you have your own little crew with you, you lead them, you have that tight-knit group, and you see your rewards instantaneously when you respond on a call, whether it's someone's grandmother that's having chest pain and she's having a heart attack, and you make a difference with that patient, or you are on a vegetation fire and you're able to stop that fire before it gets to a home, and you just know that you made a difference in somebody's life in a positive way. And then I became a battalion chief and eventually a deputy fire chief. And part of my career was being on a CAL FIRE incident management team, where I would go throughout the state to the largest fires and see the devastation of these fires. And the realization that our work needs to start before the fires start, and that we need to have so much more prevention work done. The Thomas Fire, which is the Christmas time fire that was down in Ventura County and Santa Barbara County, we had an area where there was a tremendous amount of vegetation management work that had been performed prior to the fire. And I found that we were 4 times more effective on the fire ground in that area. And 1,300 homes were threatened by that fire. 12 were destroyed. And yes, it's terrible that 12 homes were destroyed, but that is a ratio that is just unheard of in success. And I firmly believe it was because of all of the work that was done before the fire ever occurred. And that's what's created that passion for me to get into the wildfire prevention world. Some of my returns are not instantaneous like it was when I was a firefighter, but I know long-term that our work is going to make our communities that much stronger. And then I was asked to talk about maybe some of the attributes that are required to be either in the fire service or in the wildfire prevention world. And I'll say the number one attribute, and this is a phrase I stole from another fire chief, is you have to have a servant's heart. You have to want to serve people. And it doesn't matter what those people look like, what their backgrounds are, what their socioeconomic status, what color they are, how they affiliate, or even what they have done in their lives. Maybe it was someone that was injured while they were doing something that was actually harming other people. Well, guess what? You have to provide for that person in the exact same way as you would provide for your grandmother. And so you have to be able to care for people regardless of any opinion that you may or may not have. I heard the doctor talking about having a mentor. I cannot agree with that more. And the fire service is very strong in mentorship. And it was always pounded in me that, okay, we are mentoring you so that when you are in a position to mentor people, that you have an obligation to do that as well. And I think that's something that has served the fire service well. And, you know, I do everything I can to help people get into the fire service. Even if someone just walks up to me on the street and they ask me how they can get into the fire service, I'm there for them. You have to, in my opinion, have an unrelenting passion to learn. You can never, ever stop learning. After 30 plus years in the fire service, guess who still takes classes and who continues to push himself to learn more, and continue to challenge yourself. What are you going to learn today? And don't isolate yourself to your learning just to the formal environment, or isolate yourself to learning from people who have been there and done that. Guess what? I've learned things from someone that showed up at the fire station for the first time in their lives. And so I make myself available to learn from absolutely everybody. And that kind of leads to, don't ever become comfortable in what you're doing. When you become comfortable, you become stagnant, and you limit yourself for any opportunities for growth. I'll use a getting promoted in the fire service analogy. I've seen so many people go, oh, I'm not ready to be a captain yet, I'm not going to take the captain's test. And they sit back and they don't take that captain's test. And then but what they didn't find out is that if they would have taken that captain's test, they learn so much about what they're going after. They learn so much about themselves. They actually become better at the position that they're in. And believe me, I was successful in getting promoted. I got promoted to the second highest rank in the fire department. But believe it or not, I was not promoted more often than I was promoted. And that's just a part of life. You are going to, I don't want to call them failures. You're going to have lessons that you learn. And by, I like calling them mistakes. And I actually would encourage the people that work for me to make mistakes. Now, to understand when to make that mistake is important. You don't want to make that mistake when someone's life is on the line. But if you are challenging yourself, you are going to make mistakes, and then you're going to learn from those mistakes. And so my challenge was, don't make the same mistake twice. And then also, if you don't push yourself for an opportunity that maybe you don't know you're ready for it yet, but if you take that opportunity and maybe you don't succeed, but you learn those lessons, now when you are ready for that next step in your life, you've actually already learned about that next step, and you become so much more prepared for that next step. And teamwork environment, I consider the fire service and wildfire prevention is the same. I consider it an industrial sport. And so you have to be physically fit. You have to be able to function as a team, because nothing we do on the fire ground is as an individual. It is all 100% a team effort. And part of being an industrial athlete is knowing your opponent. And in this case, our opponent is medical emergencies. Our opponent is water rescue. Our opponent is structural firefighting, or it's wildland firefighting. And what type of, let's take football as an example. How much do they game plan based on their opponent? And they know exactly what their opponent's going to do before they ever get on to that playing field. Well, that's what you have to do in the fire service. And I'd probably argue that's what you have to do in any career. You want to know what your obstacles are, how those obstacles are going to be presented to you. And so that you can game plan how you're going to get those obstacles. That way, when something weird happens, you already had it in your mind how you're going to react to that. And then the last thing I'll say, and I think this is true for any profession or anything in life, and I'll use parenting. You have to have a passion for it. You have to, and if you don't have a passion for something, I encourage you not to engage in that. So I hope that met with what you guys were looking for, Alex. And
Yeah, perfect.
I'll open up to any questions.
For sure. I have a couple of questions in the industrial occupational athlete. I was like, did you trademark that? Because if not, like, I'm getting it first. You know, you don't sleep on it. That's good. I never heard that before. Thank you. So there was a question in the chat box. EMT for wildland firefighters, would that fall under CAL FIRE, Marin County? Is there a need? Are people looking for like EMTs and wildland firefighting?
So that is an increasingly increased. Sorry, my dog's barking. That's a position that's being used more and more on the fire line, but we draw from the fire agency throughout the state of California, whether it is a municipal fire department, CAL FIRE, or a contract county like ours. And so it's people who have firefighter 1, people who have EMT 1, and then they go through some additional training on how to interoperate on a wildland fire ground as an EMT. It's an awesome position. Great question.
And another question. So we're talking about like wildland fires and such, and you know, a lot of times, you know, they are seasonal jobs. How does this career look like, you know, with the fire season, the wildland fire season kind of extending? Do these look like they're going to continue to be season jobs? Could a student find a long-term career in like defensible space, vegetation, wildland firefighting within those that field?
So as far as seasonal for the firefighting aspect, so many of our seasonal firefighters at Marin County Fire have become full-time firefighters because they were able to go to school on their off time. Now, the amount of time that now that fire season is extending, their availability to go to school has sometimes been limited, but any quality organization is going to bend over backwards to allow their seasonal employees to get the education they need. And I'm a huge advocate. You know, there's associate in science and fire science. There's associate science for wildfire science. But I'm a huge advocate of a bachelor's degree as well. And but I'll be honest with you, I don't actually, when I was the person interviewing people and bringing people on board, I didn't care what their bachelor's degree was in. I cared that they had the drive to be able to get that education. And then the critical thinking that comes with that education was the trait that I was looking for. As far as being able to get a career in wildfire prevention,
Mm-hmm.
it started out as a seasonal program, but in reality, we're turning that into a year-round program. But there still is the ability to work as a seasonal and then still get your education.
And you gave some advice for someone who's interested in this career. Do you have any other pieces of advice for someone who may want to start off in wildfire prevention career?
Say that again. I'm sorry, Alex.
Oh, for sure. Any piece of advice for someone who may want to get started into this career? What would be the first step, would you say?
First step is really to start looking at what the training requirements are. Look at the Santa Rosa Junior College, College of Marin, have the entry-level positions for wildfire, fire, and emergency medical technicians. So start with the education. Depending where you will live in what community you live in, are there volunteer firefighter opportunities? Start getting your experience base through that. or seasonal firefighter program with Marin County Fire, with CAL FIRE. And then every agency in Marin now is hiring wildland fire mitigation specialists. And those are the people that are going out and doing the evaluations around the homes. And so you can look at any agency in Marin right now and look for that opportunity. And I think I heard the doctor talk about it. Don't just sit back and wait for it. Go out and seek it. It's not going to come to you.
And to put in the box, is that considered home hardening?
So home hardening is what we're learning is in these urban conflagrations of fires, it is home to home spread that's causing the biggest devastation. Some of the vegetation isn't even burning. And so if we can make our homes less ignitable, then the chances of it decreases the severity of these urban conflagrations. So home hardening is like making sure that your roof is not a flammable roof. The vents for your attic are ember resistant, so embers won't go into your attic and catch your attic on fire. The siding that you have on your home, and then your subfloor vents, those are the key areas that we're talking about for home hardening.
And how has your day-to-day changed, job changed now with COVID restrictions are easing up?
So when it came to the fire service side of it, the day-to-day changes were obviously increased use of PPE, both on going on medical aids or interacting with the members of the public. But then we, until the fire departments reached a certain threshold of inoculations, PPE day in, day out at the fire stations. Zoom meetings. Let me tell you, the fire service was super resistant to remote meetings, whether it was through Zoom or any other platform. And it forced us into being able to use the online forum. And it's actually made us a lot more efficient, because instead of driving for a half an hour from one meeting to another, I look at the clock. If I'm 3 minutes before the meeting, I log in. But there's downsides to that too. The social interaction before and after meetings are vital. The restrictions are starting to ease up, and that's just like the rest of our society right now.
Mm-hmm. And one more question. So, in your background, you were a captain, you were a chief, right? Can you talk just a little bit about if a person kind of, I want to say maybe envisions themselves in the role, what are some of the differences that they would be encountering as a chief, from a captain, from a firefighter? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So that captain has that that more up close and personal relationship with their crew. That it has they a lot of times have a greater impact of the development and the safety of their crew than a battalion chief would. They're together day in, day out. They're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, and there's so much bonding that occurs during meal times. That's the way humans are wired. And then a good captain is making sure that their crew, their personnel are receiving the resources they need from that supervisor. A term that maybe I hope everyone in the room has heard before: servant leadership. That the leader is there to serve the people they are leading by providing them the resources they need to succeed. And so they're that more hands-on, and you see that more immediate return on reward, right? Whereas the chief officer is rising a little bit higher and looking at, instead of just the one engine company, looking at 6 engine companies, looking at the whole shift. And if you're going to create some type of representation of a family, the captain is the parent, and the battalion chief is the grandparent. And again, I'm big fan of servant leadership, but that battalion chief is making sure that the captains all have the resources they need to be able to provide for their personnel. And then just forecasting, and a big part of leadership is providing direction. and understanding where we're going. And so that battalion chief is looking way out ahead and saying, this is where we're going. This is why we're going that way. And this is how we're going to get there. And I'm a very big believer of building in the why, is because if everyone knows the why and they know what the end state is, then when they hit a roadblock, they hit a detour, and maybe grandpa isn't there or dad isn't there to give that course correction. If they know the why behind everything, then they know what course correction to be able to make.
Well, Mark, thank you for taking time to talk with everybody today on the webinar. And any attendees, if you have any questions that come to you later, feel free to reach out to Sita and myself, and we'll go ahead and get those answered for you. And we'll continue to share more information about some of these new opportunities as they get developed. Yeah, no, Sita, Mark, thanks again. Sita, I'll let you close us off, the last one. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no, thank you everybody for showing up for our final session of the Career Speaker Series, the spring session. And Mark, thank you for finishing it up with a very important, occupation and just point of focus for all of us coming into the summer. So thank you so much for that. And I look forward to all those partnerships, just even through the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay and through Marin College of Marin. I know the North Bay, the Conservation Corps North Bay is working on some stuff. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing you coming right up in the future as we partner and create these programs to serve our community.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks
right.
for taking the time.
Have a great
Take
night.
care. You too. Bye.